Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Burton, and we have been talking about critical theory. First, we asked, what is critical theory? Then I tried to show you critical theory is a philosophy. It's a system of truth. And then we talked about common ground for discussing difficult topics, particularly critical theory, a way of not having to give in to fear and not giving up the discussion. Now I want to give a series of arguments. So remember, I'm a logic teacher. I want to use logic to talk about critical theory, and I want to give you a series of arguments. Now your job is to test these arguments to see if they're sound. An argument can be tested in terms of its validity, its form, and its content. So if an argument is in good form, which is what logic tests, and the content is true, then then the conclusion, you should adopt it as true. Okay? So I'm going to give you a series of arguments, and this is connected to not giving up the conversation about critical theory. Okay? So I'm calling critical theorists and non-critical theorists to come to the table. And here's my proposal. So in the past videos, I talked about critical theory is a system of belief. So here's a premise, major premise. Critical theory is a system of belief. Belief is a category of thought. So critical theory is in the category of thought, ideas. Okay? Thoughts, second argument, major premise. Thoughts are addressed by reason. Critical theory is a category of thought, and so critical theory should be addressed by reason. Check my argument. Third argument, major premise. Thoughts that affect the public should be addressed publicly. Minor premise. Critical theory affects the public, big time. Conclusion, critical theory should be addressed publicly. That's my third argument. Fourth argument, public discourse requires common ground. Critical theory is part of public discourse, so critical theory requires common ground, and that's what we discussed in the last video. So there is a way of discussing it, and there is a way of not resorting to emotion or will or violence. Fifth argument. Common ground for discourse requires commitment to common ground. So we got to have skin in the game. Yes, I'm committed to these 4 principles of common ground. If there's no commitment to common ground, then there is no common ground for discourse. So if there's no commitment, then there's no basis for a conversation. There's no common ground. All right. Now, if there's no common ground for dialogue, what happens to society? We walk away from the discussion. Perhaps we walk away from society. Do you know some people are proposing that? Walk away. It's a stalemate. And I think we've been living in a stalemate state for a while. And I think this coronavirus stuff and the political climate has forced us into taking sides, so to speak. So we could walk away. We could use force and go for a power grab, which seems to be what some people are advocating. Let's just take up arms and get it done. I don't think that's a good point, a good move. Or how about this? We can consider changing our minds. So we have stalemate, power grab, or change of mind. And that's uncomfortable, and it's hard, but that's the one I advocate for. Perhaps we should reconsider our assumptions and think about changing our minds about some things. But that means we'd have to be persuaded to change our mind, which means we need to come back to the table and come back to reason, because persuasion apart from reason isn't going to happen. It's just a force. All right, now this is going to lead into the next part, which could be a little more philosophical, a little more hard to get your head around, but It's about epistemology. How do I know? So I'm going to make this argument, and maybe this is the most controversial of the arguments I'm presenting. What is this, number 6 now? Argument number 6. Critical theory assumes a Nietzschean epistemology. Now I'll have to explain that. Critical theory assumes a Nietzschean epistemology. There is no common ground with Nietzschean epistemology. Why? Because Nietzsche, in his philosophy, rejects reason as ontological. If you reject reason and you keep talking, there's a lack of integrity. And I think he saw that and he went into silence for the last 10 years of his life. If there's no reason, then there's nothing that's clear to reason. There's a denial of the principle of clarity. And if there's no thing that's clear, then the basic things aren't clear and the rational presuppositional method is out the door. So, major premise, critical theory assumes Nietzschean epistemology. There's no common ground with Nietzschean epistemology. Therefore, there's no common ground with critical theory, given its assumptions. And this is the sad part. I think this is why it becomes so difficult to discuss these things. If you don't have reason, then you don't have a basis for discussion. And I'm going to suggest the problem with modern, postmodern, post-Nietzschean philosophy is that they gave up on reason as ontological. That's what my book was about. That's why I think my book is so important. Maybe it's not eloquently written, but I think there's some true stuff in there about what happens when reason is not ontological. All right, so I'm going to say, critical theory brothers and sisters, please name your assumptions, examine your assumptions, and re-examine your assumptions and return to the table, because this is a critical discussion we're having in terms of implications for society, implications for the academy in that people are going to get turned off and turn away from the academy. I'm reading books about how the academy has become politicized. In a sense, yes, because critical theory has a political aspect to it. But in a sense, no, it's a philosophy. And as a philosophy, it seeks to undergird all the institutions of culture. And so the academy is just one institution. Critical theory seeks to be a foundation for the family, for religion, for the political order, the state, for the economic order, and for education. So maybe it started in education, but it has become a rival world view, and it has to be looked at that way. It's not just a political thing. It's a philosophical system of truth, claiming truth. Is it really true? We need to come back to the table. Philosophical assumptions need to be defended philosophically. Critical theory is a philosophy. Critical theory needs to be defended philosophically. There, a 7th argument for you. Can logic address critical theory? Yes, I think we're on our way to doing so now. All right, thank you for joining me. Today we discussed logic and critical theory and how critical theory needs to be discussed in a philosophical sense, and we can do that in logic. All right, thanks for joining me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.